Hey, friends, welcome back to the Do Cool Shit podcast. It's me, Meryl. I'm here solo today. And today's episode is going to be a little bit different, but same vibe and same goal as you leave today. We are going to be talking about food and macro tracking. This is something that I've been having a lot of discussions about lately with my clients, with people out in the world. And if you know me by now, we are not going to talk about this in that obsessive shame spiral, weigh every crumb, cry over a cookie type of way. I am going to talk about tracking as a tool because that's truly how I look at it and how I coach my clients to use it. It's genuinely a powerful and empowering tool, especially when you couple it with all the other things that, I talk about. It is one that when you use it the quote unquote right way, when you use it without that kind of negative diet culture-y lens that has been placed upon it for so long, it can actually give you more freedom, not less. So, whether you've tried tracking before and you hated it, or you've been curious but scared to start, or you're already tracking and wondering why it's not working the way you thought it would, keep listening. This episode is for you. So, let's get into it. First, I want to talk about a little bit more why tracking has a bad reputation. Let's acknowledge that, for most people, and myself included in this in the past, for sure, the word tracking immediately stirs up this image of restriction and obsession and failure. And that's not by accident. That's diet culture at work. Tracking was, I think, when I thought about it first, it's like this calorie restrictive thing. And that's the only lens that it is looked at through. We were taught that logging your food was about control. It was about earning and burning. And it really was looked at about being good or bad based on what was reflected in the app at the end of the day. And when that's the lens you're looking through, tracking for sure is freaking miserable because every number becomes this verdict on your self-worth. But that's not what tracking inherently is. That's what tracking becomes when it has that layer of shame and that kind of negative connotation attached to it. And those are two completely different things. Tracking, really, at its core, is just data, however you want to say that. It's information, it's awareness. It is a window into what's actually happening with your intake. And for most people, that window is genuinely like when they look through that window, it's kind of eye-opening in many, many ways. When you start tracking with curiosity instead of judgment, you can see things like, are you eating enough protein to actually support your muscle and recovery and body composition goals? I will tell you, most people are not. I think it's gotten a little bit better recently with kind of this surge in a protein being the thing. But a lot of people aren't eating enough protein, or they think that there's more protein in things than there actually is. What does your fiber intake actually look like? Huge spoiler here. Most people are significantly under where they really need to be. And fiber is something that heavily influences things like health and bloating and curbing cravings. You can see things like where you may be falling short on nutrients or vitamins and minerals. And these are things that influence things like hormone health. and just health in general. And yes, even body composition. And you can see things like, hey, what's your actual caloric intake? Because a lot of people are like, I know what it is, but this actually gives a very, very accurate view, which, again, when you don't attach any other things to that, it's very, very powerful and empowering information. All of that information matters, whether your goals are performance or body composition changes with things like losing fat, gaining muscle, sustainability within those areas, having energy, improving your health, or just, being a generally functional human being, or, feeling more like yourself. All of these things matter. And that's not punishment, that's awareness. And awareness is one of the most powerful tools that you have. Now, let's get into the mindset piece. And if you know me, I just love this. Mindset pieces are my bread and butter. This is where it gets really good and really interesting if you're a nerd like me. The mindset you bring to tracking is everything. And it shows up in ways that are super, super sneaky. I want to give you a few examples of things that I hear regularly. One thing that I hear often, really often from parents when we talk about tracking is I don't want my kids to see me weighing and measuring my food. And this is even after we discuss tracking and how we're going to do it in a way that's different. This is still something that people say. And, I love that this comes up because it's coming from a really good place. The intention is great. These parents don't want to see that same vibe, for lack of better words, passed down into their kids, that poor food relationship, poor maybe body image relationship, that restrictive aspect, and like all the things that people are working to change. They don't want to pass that down to their kids, and I completely respect that. I don't want that either. But if this is something that you've thought before or you're thinking, here's something to sit with. That thought is living inside of a restriction story. It's assuming that what your kids would see is obsession and scarcity and fear around food. But when you change the meaning, what could happen? What if what your kids saw was a parent who is curious, who takes their health seriously, who uses information to make decisions? Would you want to hide that? Probably not, right? You'd probably want them to see exactly that and be able to do those things. The tool isn't the problem. The meaning that we give it is. I've had clients go into tracking where they start to do it openly in front of their kids and encourage asking questions versus doing it kind of secretly, because they create then this opportunity to talk about eating enough protein, and protein being important to be strong and to have muscles and be able to do push-ups, or relating it to sports that their kids were playing. Or they talk about, hey, I'm making sure that I'm eating enough, because if I don't eat enough, then I don't have a lot of energy. And talking about energy and how food relates to energy, and when your body has energy, what it can do versus feeling tired and not being able to do all the things that they want to do when their body doesn't have enough energy. And that is not only changing the way that they look at food, it did change that. I have multiple client examples of people doing this, but it also gives their kids this cool new lens to look at things, and kids are curious, so they get involved, and it makes the whole process a lot more fun. Another example is that I've heard is I can't eat the foods I actually like if I'm tracking. And this one also lives inside the restriction story. The assumption that logging your food means eliminating everything you enjoy and just like white knuckling through meals and saying peace out to anything that tastes good. But that's not what data asks you to do. Tracking shows you what's there. That's it. And when you actually understand your intake and you have a view of what your intake looks like, you often find there's way more room for the foods that you love than what you thought. And also, again, it gives you so much more clarity and information into things like how you're feeling because you're working with real information instead of fear or assumption. And I've worked through this with multiple clients who the real thing is they're attaching morality to foods and tasty foods, something like a cookie or dessert or going out to eat or whatever it is, and not feeling like they can have those things if they're tracking. That is looking at it through the lens of tracking only meaning restriction. And when they have learned to track that cookie or estimate the food that they have in a meal out, and I'm not saying that the goal is to always do these things, but learning how to do these things and gaining information from it and realizing, like, you know what? This is information, taking away the emotionality. And it's given them a lot more freedom and feeling like, hey, I can actually have these foods as part of my life while they also have made progress in their body composition goals. And the through line in both of these examples is that people are protecting themselves from something. We've talked about this, or I've talked about this in other episodes in various different ways. This is how self sabotage pops up. There's reasons why people do things. The intention is supportive. And oftentimes it's from feeling out of control, from seeing something they don't want to see, from confirming a story that they already believe about themselves. And again, I totally get it. That protection makes total sense, but it's also the thing that keeps people stuck in those patterns, and those patterns aren't working for you anymore. So let's change it. So let's talk about how to actually start. And where I like to start is in awareness. How to actually start tracking in a way that doesn't send you into that shame spiral or where you like start tracking and then stop as soon as something quote unquote goes wrong. So first and foremost, you need a tracking app, right? And there's a bunch out there, and the well-known one is MyFitnessPal, but the one that I recommend is called Macros First. If you've used MyFitnessPal in the past, then this isn't so different, but I just really like it much better. It has a barcode scanner even in the free version. It's really simple layout and it gives you a lot of information. It's what I use, and I was a MyFitnessPal user for years, and I will be honest that switching over to Macros First initially was so scary to me, and I didn't want to do it because I had this huge database built up, but I'm so glad that I did. And this is also the app that I recommend to my clients. So I'll link that information in the show notes. Another app that is a pretty good one is Chronometer, but I think it's a little bit mm, it's a little bit harder to use. So again, I really recommend Macros First. Now, when you start, I want you to start with one goal. The goal is awareness. Your goal is not to hit a target with calories or macros. It is not perfection. It's just to look at what is there. And what I recommend is like, don't go in initially with a goal of weight loss or anything like that. Don't have a calorie target, period, the end. The best place for people to start is just logging what they're eating right now. Not only does it just give you information and where you're at, like from a caloric standpoint and a macronutrient standpoint, there's also a lot of things that can pop up as you're doing that. And when you take the other target goals away and the goal is awareness, it takes pressure off. So just look at what's actually there. And while you're tracking, do something with it. Write down the thoughts and feelings that come up. Definitely take note of them at the very least. Did you feel anxious logging something? Did you feel guilty logging something? Did you want to run away and not log something? Which, if that feeling pops up, still log it. Did you feel relieved about anything? Ashamed? Proud? Did you notice anything with your eating behaviors? Like maybe you are reactive when you eat? Were you less hungry after you ate certain food or certain food combinations? Start to create awareness around those things. Write them down, especially with the emotionality and like the reactions that come up. That's the real work in here. That's where your relationship with food actually lives. That's not ever going to be something that lives inside of an app. That data from your logging and tracking brings it to the surface so that you can actually see it and really start to face it and work in it, dig in. And again, when you can look at the numbers with curiosity instead of judgment, when I didn't hit my protein today becomes like, interesting. What got in the way of it? Or what foods did have protein in them? Where did I think I was getting more protein than I did? Instead of I'm a failure, that is when tracking stops being a diet tool and starts being this self-knowledge tool. It's when people talk about food freedom or intuitive eating, like I really truly believe, because I've seen this happen time and time and time again, I've experienced it myself as well. These things are part of it. And this is how you move away out of that all or nothing thinking. It's not by ignoring the data or anything around the data. It's by learning to use it without weaponizing it against yourself. I will tell you this this pops up with every single, I will say not every single, but in the 90 something percentile of clients that I work with. And personally, myself, I can think back to when I started to track macros and my goal was like, I need to be under this certain amount of calories, or I need to hit my targets, my macro targets exactly. And I'll tell you my own shit was that I would even like change the numbers on my food just so it would reflect the number I wanted it to be in the app. And when I stopped doing that, that's when I started to make real progress. Because, duh, what is that information giving me other than me faking myself out and fooling myself and honestly keeping myself stuck? So, really starting to track food, and when feelings popped up for me of like, oh, this is bad and I shouldn't eat this or any of these things, I actually track the food and I make note of how I'm feeling, and I try to learn from that experience where I zoom out, get some perspective, maybe think about why I was eating that food also, again, gaining information where very often when I tracked the food versus didn't track it, that actually supported me in the rest of my day too. I can't tell you how many times I would feel like I messed up and went off the rails. I eat a cookie and I'm like, oh, everything's ruined. And then the rest of my day, I'll go balls to the wall. I would probably eat six more cookies instead of just being like, okay, I ate a cookie. And that's fine. It doesn't have to mean anything. I would dig into it oftentimes, or a lot of the times now it's intentional. Like, hey, I'm going to build a cookie in. And when I intentionally build things in, there's never any meaning other than the purpose I put into it. But that's how I've made progress because the other stuff, it just doesn't work. Okay, I'm going to start yapping and move on. Common pitfalls that come up for people. This is a really meaty part and how to navigate them. Tracking sounds simple in theory, log your food, look at the numbers, but in practice, there are a handful of places where people get really, really tripped up. And I want to walk through, it's not going to be all of them, but I want to walk through many of them that come up for people when I work with them. Number one, I don't know how to track this. There's no label, or they're out to eat, they're unsure of like how much it is. This comes up so often. You make something at home, or you're eating at a restaurant, or you grab something at your friend's house, or your mom made you something and there's no barcode to scan, there's no nutrition label in sight, and most people just skip it. They do not log it because they don't know how to, they don't know what it is. But here's what I want you to hear in here. An imperfect estimate is always better than nothing. When you skip logging a meal because you're not sure how to track it, you're not helping yourself at all. You're creating a blind spot, and blind spots are way more misleading than an estimate that's slightly off. So, when you estimate, here's how you can do it. Think in landmarks. Your your hands can be a great guide. A palm-sized portion of protein, if you look at your hand, that's roughly about 3 to 4 ounces. So, if you have a burger, look at the size of it. If you look at your hand in like a cup, that's roughly half a cup cooked. Or maybe you can visualize cups better than weight. People have been doing things for a long time, like I weigh my things most of the time, then I use estimated grams. But most people don't have that from the get-go. So if you can visualize a cup, if you have rice on your plate or in your bowl, how many cups of cooked rice do you think are about there? Log that in. How many tablespoons of something do you think are about there? Use those as kind of landmarks. If you're unsure, a lot of people, if they're estimating, will just go in and be like, I had a burger. And that's fine. Again, estimating something in there and getting something in there is better than nothing. It's also going to be less accurate. So another thing that you can do is just break down that meal into components. If you have a burger, for example, you go out to eat, or you're at someone's house, or you make it yourself, whatever, log the beef or the chicken or whatever it is. About how many ounces is it? Is it cooked or is it raw? What cut of beef is it? Like if you go out to eat, probably at least 80-20, sometimes 70-30 beef. Log a hamburger bun. Log some of the cheese. Log condiments that are on it. Log french fries if you have that on the side. Break things down and log them as components. That is going to give you way more accurate than I had one burger. You could also potentially find menu items from somewhere that's similar if there isn't the exact restaurant in your tracking app. So if I went to get a burger at a local, I know I keep using burger, at a local place, maybe I use Red Robin in my food tracking app as a reference instead. Again, there's many, many ways to estimate things, and estimation is better. And then you just put into knowledge for yourself, this was an estimation. And things could be a little bit off in here, and that's okay. I know that now. I have that in there now, and it goes into reasoning and correlation. Now I have this information. And over time, and the more you practice estimating, the more accurate your eye gets. It's a skill. And just like any skill, it gets better with reps. The goal is not perfection. The goal is a picture that's close enough to be useful. And in this, area here, done is always better. And in anything, done is better than perfect, right? Number two, I don't want to log that because I don't want to see it. And this one is so human, right? And I have so much compassion for it. You know, you had a night where things went kind of sideways, or you ate something that you decided was bad, or you thought the thought of logging feels like submitting evidence against yourself. So you just don't. And here's what happens. Like what's happening with your nervous system from this standpoint, your brain is trying to protect you. If you don't log it, it didn't officially happen. You don't have evidence. You don't have to look at that number. You don't have to feel the feelings that are associated with that, usually guilt, shame, disappointment. But here's the problem. Avoiding that data doesn't make it go away. It just means that you're operating blind. And operating blind makes it harder to understand your patterns. It makes it harder to adjust. It makes it harder to make progress. So, logging the stuff that, maybe feels uncomfortable is actually one of the most powerful things that you can do. It's not to punish yourself, it is to stay in relationship with reality. It's to say, hey, this happened. I did this, practicing some ownership in there. Here's what I see. What can I learn from this? And that automatically puts you in a position of power. And, if we want to use the word control, that too. Sometimes thinking about releasing control actually puts you in a position where you have more of it. When something is hard to log, that discomfort that pops up is information. It's pointing directly at a belief or a story that you've been carrying about food or yourself, about its meaning. And that is worth exploring, not avoiding. Remember, discomfort, being able to tolerate discomfort leads to cool shit. Pitfall 3. I didn't track perfectly today, so I'm just not going to track at all. This is all or nothing in its purest form, and it's so common. Maybe you missed a meal, or you had something you don't know how to log, or it's later in the day and you haven't tracked anything all day, and now it feels pointless to do, or you log something that you feel like is gonna throw you off. So then you just blow off the whole day or the rest of the day, and then maybe even the next day too, because now you're off track. So here's a reframe here. A partially tracked day is still data. A day where you logged 4 out of 6 meals is still more information than 0. Tracking the rest of the day after a rough morning still matters. Progress doesn't live in the perfect days. It lives in what you do after you feel like something imperfect happens. So, thinking about what you can gain out of this and remembering like the goal isn't perfect hitting of your macro targets. If you log something and you're like, that's going to throw me off the rest of the day with what I have planned, keep going. That is such valid information. Imperfect data, no matter how we categorize that data, when we collect it, it consistently beats perfect data collected occasionally every single time. Number 4, I don't want to track because I want freedom. I love this one because, the is intention is there and then the intention is good. And the conclusion is just so backwards. The idea is if I'm not tracking, I'm free. I'm intuitive. I'm not one of those people who weighs their food. Like, I totally get the appeal of that. Truly, truly, I do. And here's what I see happen in reality. Without any structure or data, most people don't end up feeling free. They end up feeling chaotic and anxious and making food decisions based on emotion or habit rather than intention. And they wonder why they're not making progress, even though they feel like they're doing everything right. Lack of structure does not create freedom. It creates this different kind of noise. Now, the goal isn't necessarily to track forever. That's certainly not something I want people to feel like they need to do in order to be successful. For some people, tracking for a period of time builds enough self-knowledge and skill that they can eventually operate way more intuitively and still stay aligned with their goals. But you have to build that foundation first. You can't freestyle something that you've never actually learned. And then a lot of time those people have tracking as a tool where they can go back and use it kind of as an audit. And then for some people, they use tracking a lot because it actually just helps them. For me, I track my food, I would say probably 80% of the time. In life in general, if I'm in a fat loss phase, I'm certainly tracking way more of the time in the upper 90 percentage area because it helps me get in what I need and it helps me know what that looks like or what adjustments I need to make. But this connects to something else that I want to name because it's the same mindset in a different outfit. A lot of people only pull out tracking when they want to lose fat or want to lose weight. And it becomes this thing that they do when they're in quote unquote diet mode and then they drop completely the rest of the time. And again, like I get it because that's how diet culture taught us to use it. Tracking equals restriction equals fat loss and, that's it. But tracking is just as valuable and I would say probably even more valuable when fat loss isn't the goal. If you're trying to build muscle, if you have health related goals, you need to know that you're eating enough. If you're focused on, and when I say enough, it's in every single way, nutrient wise, macronutrients and micronutrients. If you're focusing on performance, you need to know your fueling is actually supporting your output and your recovery. If you're, just trying to feel better and have more energy, understanding your intake is still the foundation of that. And again, when people can use tracking with the alongside of cultivating their relationship with themselves and food and changing narratives and not necessarily doing that in a fat loss phase, doing that in maintenance. And maintenance is something I won't tangent into, but like I said, a lot of people don't go into maintenance intentionally. And that's where most people really should be living their lives mainly in maintenance mode. And that doesn't mean that changes don't happen in maintenance. It is a title that is not the most accurate because there's a lot of cool shit that can happen in maintenance mode. But when you only track to cut, you're reinforcing the story that tracking is a punishment you inflict on yourself to shrink. And that story will keep making tracking feel terrible every single time. So reframe it. Tracking is a tool for awareness, tracking is a tool for understanding yourself, your body, that the goal changes, but the tool kind of stays the same. Number 5, I'm tracking everything and I'm in a calorie deficit, but I'm not seeing progress. Okay. This one requires a little tough love and a lot of education because there are usually a few things going on here. First, things can get logged incorrectly way more easily than people realize. Like cooking, are you logging cooked weight or raw? Because those are very different numbers, especially for things like pasta, rice, and even meat. I had a client once that was logging rice incorrectly for like a month, and that was solely the only reason why she wasn't seeing fat loss occur. Are you measuring liquids accurately? Are you accounting for oils used in cooking or what you're adding into coffee or the dressings on salads? Are you accounting for the various bites and licks and tastes that can happen in a day? Because these things add up fast and they can really close the gap on a deficit that you thought you had. And then calorie deficits can often be miscalculated. Calorie numbers on apps are estimated based on formulas, or some people got this off of calculators online as well. And those formulas have a big margin of error. So these numbers are based off of very basic information, someone's age, their weight, their height, maybe how much movement they're doing in the day, their TDEE, their total daily energy expenditure. And this can very much vary from what that number spits out because they're not taking into account someone's dieting history, someone's internal health, their hormone health is a massive, massive thing. There's a lot of factors that can influence what a BMR is. So, like a basal metabolic rate, essentially how many calories someone expends or quote unquote burns in a day just being alive, even if they were in a coma. And then your total daily energy expenditure. So this is that BMR. It is anything else that you do in the day that is outside of activity, exercise, which exercise is a very, very, very small percentage of energy expenditure. And then the energy that is expended while actually eating and metabolizing and absorbing food. Your expenditure varies day to day based on what your day looks like, your activity, your stress levels, your sleep, hormones. And there's really no great way of tracking that. And what looks like a deficit on paper may not actually be a deficit. What a calculator tells you that your deficit is may be really, really far off of what your deficit actually could be. So this is a lot more complex, and it can take a lot of work to figure out what that is, and I'll try to go into that a little bit more later in the episode. And then thirdly here, and this is one people don't necessarily want to hear, but progress takes longer than we think it should. And we live in a world that promises fast results, especially in fitness and changing your body. And the reality of body composition change is slow and it's non-linear and it is deeply individual. And if you've been in a deficit for 2 weeks and you don't see the scale move, that doesn't mean it's not working. The scale is just one data point. There's other things that are there to look at: how your clothes fit, how you feel, how you're performing, how your hunger and energy levels are, any other biofeedback. All of that stuff matters too. And so often people quit because they don't see the scale go down. And I can't tell you how often when clients I work with don't quit and they keep going, it's like almost in the next few days, the scale drops or they take a photo and they're like, holy crap, there's crazy changes happening. And where they would have quit in the past is kind of that pivotal point when they keep going. So if you're genuinely tracking consistently and accurately and still not seeing movement after a few weeks, that's a signal to look at your numbers and not abandon the whole thing. That may be when it's time to, if your goal is fat loss, then that may be a time to adjust, because what happens when you're actually in a calorie deficit is your body will adjust to that. Your BMR adjusts, your metabolism adjust. And that's why we can't be in deficits all of the time or continually working on fat loss, because our body doesn't want to be there. Our body's job is to keep us alive, and it's going to adapt to what our intake looks like. So we want to not be in fat loss forever. And this is why it's important to come out of it for longer periods of time and be in maintenance so we can build that number back up. And future fat losses can be easier and you're actually eating more and still being able to lose fat and enjoy life more. But if you are kind of stuck, not seeing much progress, not seeing changes in your body, if you take pictures, not seeing the scale move at all, then that's when to look at, hey, am I tracking actually accurately? It might be time to decrease my caloric intake a little bit and lower carbs and or fat. And then last pitfall that I'm going to go over here is waiting to log until later in the day. And I'll be honest, this is one where it's more of like a proceed with caution than a hard no. Logging retroactively can work. And there are days where that's just life. You were busy, you forgot, you log it all at dinner. Like, that's fine. Again, having the information there is better than not. But here's where it can become a slippery slope. When logging later becomes a pattern, it makes it really easy to not be accurate. It makes it easy to underestimate our memories of what we ate, especially the stuff that we may feel less proud of, tends to get really fuzzy. I know that I've gotten into the end of the day, and especially, a long day where I've done a lot, you've used up a lot of your brain cells and energy, and it's like, what did I even eat this morning? And there's a lot of things that can go missing. Like, the handful of nuts becomes a few nuts, or it doesn't even get put in there. The extra pour of olive oil disappears entirely. That coffee that you had in the afternoon, like, doesn't even get remembered or logged. So if you find yourself consistently logging at the end of the day and kind of backtracking, and maybe that data feels a little bit too clean, that's worth paying attention to and adjusting. So let's talk about how to use tracking to actually make progress on top of all of those other things. So we've talked about mindset and we've talked about pitfalls. Let's talk about actually using tracking as a tool to move towards your goals. This is a part I love too. This is where it gets really empowering. Hit your targets consistently, not perfectly. Tracking gives you the ability to see in real time whether you are kind of like on track to hit your protein, or, hey, if I eat this, I will hit my protein today. If I eat these things, then I'm going to be on target to my calories? Oh, I'm not on target with my fiber. Let me make some adjustments and do that. You can course correct during the day instead of just hoping for the best. And it also gives you like a layout. A lot of the time, you don't even have to put that extra thought into it. You lay it out and it gives you like, oh yeah, that's what I'm going to do. That's what I'm going to make. And then if things change, you can always adjust. Nothing's ever set in stone. Over time, consistently being within your targets, even within 80 to 85%, compounds in a way that one off perfect days never will. It allows you to fit in the foods that you actually like really like and want. This is the part that surprises people the most, I would say. When you have this understanding and you do this and you learn and can learn to detach the emotionality and judgment and whatnot, you can kind of work backwards and you can see, okay, you know what? I want pizza tonight. Here's how I'm going to plan the rest of my day to make that work. Or, hey, I'm going out to dinner later. Or, you know what? I'm really craving ice cream. So tomorrow I'm going to work that in and make sure that I have that while I'm also getting in enough protein because protein is important in how I feel and what my goals are. You are not white knuckling things. You're not saying no. You're not restricting. You're not feeling guilty. You are making intentional and informed decisions. And that is freedom. And using the data to learn and adjust, not as this verdict. Your numbers are feedback. It's not a grade. If you're not hitting your protein, get curious. Dig into why. If your calories keep creeping above what your target is, look at where it's coming from, when it's coming from. Use what you see to make small intentional adjustments rather than just lighting the match and burning the whole thing down and starting over. This is the difference between the person who tracks for 2 weeks and hates it and quits and feels like a failure and the person who tracks for 6 months and learns their patterns and adjusts along the way and feels way more confident and actually makes progress. The information is only as good as what you do with it. Don't just track to track. That's what I tell people all the time. What you do with it, I believe there should be curiosity and adjustment and using that information to keep going. Okay. I feel like we could talk about this for another 2 hours, and my dog Moose is standing next to me panting because he's hungry and wants me to feed him, and his breath smells really bad, so I'm gonna let you go shortly. But here's what I would like for you to take away from today. Tracking is a tool. It is not a punishment. It is not a verdict. It is not a diet plan. It is information. And information, when you use it with curiosity, is one of the most empowering things you can have on your side. So start with awareness, notice what comes up, use that data to learn, not to judge yourself. And if you start, get macros first. Again, I'll link it in the show notes. If this episode hits home for you, or you think it would be helpful, give it a share with someone who may need to hear the things inside. Leave a review, leave a comment, let me know what landed or what was helpful for you. If you have questions about tracking, about what your numbers maybe ideally should look like, about how to actually apply this to your goals, let's chat. Message me on Instagram or email me or set up a call with me through my website. This is what we do inside one-on-one nutrition coaching with a lot of people. If you want real support in putting this all together, and I will say, I learned the hard way, even when I was a coach in this, that doing it yourself is just, it kind of feels like wasting a whole bunch of time and energy and effort. Um, you know, don't try to do it all by yourself. Let's talk. All right. As always, go do cool shit. And I will talk with you next time.